before we move on to our next segment, which is learn from Mitch Hooper, we want to thank our sponsor for today, and that is Creatures of Habit, the best overnight oats that you are ever going to eat. These things are absolutely fantastic. They have you know, fantastic ingredients in them. 30 grams of protein. It takes you, if you watch Tommy's video on social media, less than a minute to prepare these things for the next day. They're plant-based. They have probiotics and prebiotics and omega-3 healthy fats. This is like a little power-packed meal in an envelope that you just rip open, pour into a container, add water, shove it in the fridge. You're ready to go the next morning for breakfast, or you can have it as a snack. The stuff is absolutely fantastic. They have really good flavors. They got like the maple flavor. They have banana and peanut butter that's really good. They have a strawberry and walnut one. But if you're someone who likes to make your meals like on the go and you're rushed for time, this is absolutely what you want to get. Creatures of Habit. That's Creatures of Habit with a K, creaturesofhabit.com. Our code is TEF, or you can scan the QR code on your screen. You will save 20% off of your order. I love this stuff. I eat it every day. It's like my afternoon carb snack.
Yep.
And it's fantastic. And it's like I pack my lunch the night before, I pack all my food, and it's like such a relief when I get to that because it's so easy to fix. It's literally pour the thing in, water, stir, done.
And it's balanced. There's like balanced macronutrients and there's plenty of micronutrients. You're getting a bunch of good nutrition in you with very little effort. Let's be
Yeah.
honest. Um, and for all of my Fairlife crew out there, you throw some Fairlife milk in there, so you don't have to worry about the lactose.
Yeah.
Throws another 13 grams of protein in there, bumps it
Bless
up to
it up, put some
yeah.
strawberries on there.
Yep, bumps it up to 40 plus grams of protein that you can have in pretty much a minute. You don't have to worry about, and it's super easy to eat. It's delicious. For me, I love either oatmeal in the morning, overnight oats in the morning,
Mhm.
or as a pre-workout snack. Because typically for me, it's like it just
Yeah.
I can eat it within the hour and still go and work out and feel like I have plenty of fuel. So
I was always like a
it's
warm oatmeal guy until I tried this stuff. And now I'm starting to come around to like been in the fridge. It's
yeah,
pretty good.
yeah.
Yeah. Creaturesofhabit.com. The code is TEF. You will save 20% on your order. Check them out. They're fantastic people that make a really good product, and we're glad that they are on board. Okay. Uh, we, by we, I mean Tommy and Lauren, sat down to speak with Mitch Hooper, who is the defending Rogue Invitational champion, strongman athlete who has, I think, really started to revolutionize or at least change the way that strongmen train, the way they sort of view that sport as a business. Like he's really revolutionized a lot of stuff, and he's been really successful at it. Fantastic competitor, great guy. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, Tommy, Lauren, and I had a chance to sit down with him informally, just have a smoothie and an acai bowl with him
Mhm.
during Wadapalooza SoCal. Could not have been nicer. Really enjoyed his company and enjoyed picking his brain about the strongman and the business of it. And he is going to be in Aberdeen, Scotland, trying to defend his Rogue Invitational title against an absolutely a loaded field. So Tommy and Lauren sat down with him, talked about his athletic background, how he got into strongman, because he's got a pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Diverse athletic background.
Eclectic.
Yes, eclectic, diverse. He's run a marathon. He's played hockey. I think he's done like long driving and golf. He's an athlete. How he approaches the sport and the programming at the Rogue Invitational and how it plays into his skill set. So here is Tommy and Lauren's conversation with defending Rogue Invitational strongman champion Mitch Hooper.
And now we want to welcome into our show one of the most decorated strongman, Mitch Hooper. You have so many titles on the heels of the Rogue Invitational, World's Strongest Man on Earth, last year's Rogue Invitational champion, and Arnold Strongman Classic champ. We are so excited to catch up before you get to head across the country, and Tommy and I are very jealous.
Yeah, no, it's wild to be in the conversation of most decorated, but it's becoming accurate. I'm only a few years in now, and I've been fortunate enough to have every single title that I've ever competed for.
Mhm. Yeah, and I it feels like, and you mentioned it, that like you exploded onto the scene suddenly, like 2022. You started doing your first international like pro events, and then before long, you were just winning everything. I mean, whether is it like a sport background, mindset, what do you attribute like that immediate success for? Because it's very uncommon.
Well, I think immediate is how it's perceived from the outside, but it wasn't as immediate
Sure.
as it seems. So
Mhm.
just to take you through a little bit of my athletic history, growing up, I played rep hockey for 10 years, as every Canadian boy does. But in that time, I also played rep baseball. I did swimming. I played golf at a really high level, and that was my first professional foray or potential professional foray. I played rugby, track and field, American football, everything. And that during that entire time, I loved to lift heavy. And after American football, I then lost a bunch of weight, did a bodybuilding show. I then did marathons. Then I went into strength sports. But the whole time, my primary interest and the only thing that I'd always loved was going to the gym and training heavy. And so, whilst I started Strongman in around 2019 and I made World's Strongest Man in 2022, I probably started my consistent, regular heavy lifting somewhere around 2011.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's a big background of a lot of different sports, and I think when you look at high level athletes, the ones that do really excel are those who have a dynamic athletic background. But is there one of them that you can point to that started piquing your interest to maybe dabble with strongman, or at what point did you make that switch and go all in?
So the reason that I started after university, I graduated my undergraduate in human kinetics. I got a great job with a professional basketball team, and I thought that was going to be my career path. Then when I found out it wasn't, we had lost in the semifinals or something, and I realized that there was no net positive to the world if my team wins or the other team wins or whatever. So I decided to go to the exercises medicine space, moved to Australia, and I went to help people with chronic conditions, injuries, unique circumstances, whatever it is. And when I made that decision, I'd always been healthy, healthy-ish. I'd always been moving. I'd always been active, and I thought there's no way for me to relate to anybody if I've never tried to do what I'm going to tell them to do. And so that's why I just have felt the obligation to take everything to the extreme. And that started as losing weight. And my first thing was a bodybuilding show. I was horrible. I came 11th out of 12, but I got in shape, in bodybuilding shape, and it's not an easy thing to do. After that, I pushed my aerobic fitness, and that's why I ran marathons. And the next thing was just pushing my strength. And strongman happened really serendipitously for me. I went to a powerlifting gym. Some guys in there did strongman. I won the national powerlifting title over in Australia. It got pretty boring pretty fast, and these guys sort of goaded me into trying strongman. From there, I did 4 local shows, and after 4 local shows, I got a really political and undeserved on merit invite to World's Strongest Man, but I certainly made the most of the opportunity. But to be honest, when I was moving back from Australia to Canada is when I got that invite. But my plan was to give up strongman and to go into triathlons because I was also opening a business, an exercises medicine business in my hometown. And World's Strongest Man happened, and I came eighth there. Since I came eighth at World's Strongest Man, I'm on 20, I believe it's 21 or 22 consecutive podiums. And I didn't win in my first 4 shows, but after that, I've won the last 13 of 18, I believe.
I mean, talk about a tipping point, right? Yeah, World's Strongest Man, it's like the alternative is triathlons, which I think for the average person, it feels like complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But once you do hit that tipping point in World's Strongest Man, what is the change there from someone that they see show up at a big competition that takes eighth to, all right, this is the switch, I have to dial it up, and now this is going to look a little bit different from a professional standpoint?
Yeah, I held off a long time, longer than you would imagine, before I said that this is going to be something that I commit to as a career. And frankly, how much am I even committing to it as a career right now? Like I still have my contingency plans and the other things that I do and the social media and the businesses and but I came eighth at World's Strongest Man, and my business partner for my clinic up here in Barrie, he said one of our obvious concerns has to be that your strongman career takes off. And I told him, like, look, that is not going to happen. Like, it's. I did well at one show. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Then I came third at a Giant Slab at Royal Albert Hall in London, and that's the qualifying tour for World's Strongest Man. So I was really, really happy with that. Then I came third at the next show, the next Giants live show, but their reputation as being a little bit lighter, a little bit faster. And at that stage, there was major questions for me around like, is he actually strong or does he just do well in lighter moving events? After that Giants live, a week later, I went to the Shaw Classic. Sorry, I came second at that Giants live. The week after, I went to the Shaw Classic, which is the heaviest, hardest show in the world. If you win that show, you're a badass. Everyone knows World's Strongest Man and thinks that that's our pinnacle. To me, it's the strongest man on earth. That show tries to kill you. It tries to break you down. It is horrendous, in a beautiful way. I had a 1 week turnaround from Giants Live to that show, and at that show, one of the guys came up to me and he said, "Just so you know, next to nobody believes that you're actually strong and that this has any legs. This is the show that you can prove it." And he's talking about fans, not the other guys. And at that show, I came third. After I came third there, I started being fortunate enough to win some competitions. And I didn't see it in myself that I could be the best in the world after I won the Arnold, after I won the World's Strongest Man. Not until I won my second Arnold did I go, okay, this is legit, and I got some pretty special things to chase now.
Did you have a follow-up, Tommy?
I was just gonna say, but like even saying that, like, you start to win some of the biggest competitions on the planet for the sport, and then it still took some time for you to really kind of like mentally flip that switch or acknowledge it. And what do you attribute that to? Was that just your own skepticism? Is it you always, you mentioned you have contingency plans. Is that just a part of who you are?
It honestly just all still feels too good to be true. I'm 6'3". I'm not 6'8". I'm 320 pounds. I'm not 450 pounds. You don't look at me and just go, that is the best strength athlete in the world. And I see that as well. I stand beside the guys and I look at Thor, I look at Tom Stolman, I'm looking up at them as I'm staring at their chests. And I'm like, surely I can't be stronger than these dudes. Surely I can't be better. Maybe I've just tactically figured out how to do well in a few shows, but it's hard to believe. It's also just hard to believe that you could go and your fifth ever strongman show is World's Strongest Man and you make the finals, and you're less than 10 shows deep, and now you're being considered one of the top 3 in the world. It really felt too good to be true. And I think since I didn't have the goal as a child to be the world's strongest man, I felt like I didn't yearn for it. I didn't need that to complete my journey of being as strong as I could be. And so I didn't get ahead of myself and I didn't convince myself of anything that didn't have really sound evidence behind it. And, it happened faster than I was able to emotionally digest it. For example, I was driving down to World's Strongest Man in 2023, and I was driving down with my assistant. And logically, I thought that I was going to win the show. I sort of went through the events and the guys who were in contention. I thought, like, it's likely that I'm going to win. But driving down to the contest was the first time that I actually thought, like, what would it feel like to call yourself the world's strongest man? I never even contemplated it before, maybe 2 or 3 days before winning the show. And so I think my priorities are that strongman is up there, but it's certainly not number one. My family is first. Who I am as a person is first, is tied for first, I suppose. The health of everyone who I care about, and then strongman is a great sport that's changed my life and helped so many people. But I just didn't have that thing where I needed to claim that I was the best in the world or that I needed to commit everything to it. And there's financial realities to when you start to commit to these things. It's not dissimilar to CrossFit, where in strongman, if you win every single show, you make around 600,000 US for the year, which is amazing. If you come fifth in every show, you make $50,000 for the year, which is hardly a livable wage. And so even as someone as consistent, as successful as myself, you would be a bit naive to think that you could ride this wave forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And kind of speaking to that, you look at athletes, specifically yourself, something that I love or have loved watching is your journey on Instagram and this balance of being a strong man with all of these decorated titles and absolutely crushing it on the competition floor. But then we get a dip into your personality and the goofy side of you. What is that balance of being an athlete, but also like knowing in order to make ends meet, you kind of have to be an influencer too?
Yeah, the whole social media thing, I don't want to be famous. I don't want people to know my face. I just recognize that there's no choice. if I want my life to turn out the way I want, and if I want the people who work for me, their life to turn out how they want. And frankly, it's harder for me to bear down and be serious as an athlete than it is for me to mess around and have fun at the gym. Uh, all of the stuff that you see on my social media are things that I just think about when we're driving to the gym, or I look at something or someone in the gym and I think that's hilarious, that's perfect. And it's just who I am. I take a lot of pride that if I speak to my wife or my mom, and my wife, by the way, met me just after I finished running marathons. I was 220 pounds. She didn't sign up for any of this, but I speak to them, and I yeah, I would check in as I was coming up, like, am I representing myself accurately on camera? And the resounding feedback that I get from family and friends is that it's just all me. All the stuff that I say that people might not like, or might be endearing, or might be annoying. It's literally, if you were on my back porch with me for a day, I'm talking about the same stuff in the same way and hanging out. And I just don't have the energy or capacity to pretend to be anything that I'm not. And it comes across authentic because it truly is.
Mm.
It's all stuff that first makes me laugh and makes me entertained, and thankfully other people agree as well.
Yeah, no doubt. You mentioned something just now that kind of struck me is, your wife met you after running marathons, and she didn't sign up for any of this, but, like, just reflecting on that, like, the difference and change of your path over that time, and maybe one of the unseen things is, the support system behind you, or what goes into accompanying you in that journey.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can share about that? I mean, whether it's from your wife's standpoint and having to see, her husband go from running 26.2 miles to lifting, I don't know, 26.2 thousand pounds over the course of a competition.
Yeah, I think in strongman in particular, you don't find anyone at the top who's consistent who doesn't have a stable wife or girlfriend. It just doesn't happen. And I think the number of people who I see that they have to debate with their wife or negotiate when they go to the gym, or what competitions they might go to, or whatever. I've never once, and we're on the same page, but I've never once felt like I have to ask permission to go train or to go to a show or anything. And I think it's just an innate understanding that I have our family's best interest at heart. And she didn't sign up for Strongman, but you don't need to speak to me for very long to know that my life will not be conventional, and I won't accept it being conventional. I just didn't know how unconventional it would be. But having a strong person by your side is so useful in so many different ways. When you're coming up in the sport, it's difficult. It's a grind, and you don't know how far you're going to make it. And there are times where you have to make the choice, especially in strongman. You make the choice to say, okay, I'm going to do what it takes to be a professional, be one of the best in the world. And you're making choices that they're not good for your health. It's not good to be obese. It's not good to have a higher body fat percentage. It's not good to put your blood pressure through that in, excuse me, in an acute sense when you're training. It's not good to give yourself indigestion because you're so heavy and have to eat so much like you guys are hearing. But having people who understand what it's all for and support you along the way, and are just as excited for you, then that's great. And one of the best things that Strongman has given to me is that if you don't see my family with me at a competition, which you won't in Scotland, it's it's because they're all on my mom's back porch, all together, all watching the show, and I can help my family to get together multiple times. Most families have Christmas and Thanksgiving, and like that's when they might get together. And we have Christmas, Thanksgiving, World's Strongest Man, the Rogue Invitational, Strongest Man on Earth, the Arnold, on and on and on. And our family has just gotten so much closer because of that. And
Hmm.
my social circle has frankly shrunk because of that, because you just don't know who has your best interest. But once
Mm.
you find those people, then life becomes really good. And I think one of the secrets to me being so consistent is I have everything in context. When I lost World's Strongest Man this year, it's the only show that I've lost in the last 9. But I didn't have any sort of emotional negative feelings towards it because I did everything I could. My family was still happy. They all still love me. They all still supported me. We go home and we have a beautiful family, a healthy family, a beautiful home. Like, how could you be upset about your situation at the moment? And so I just don't carry that pressure with me into competition. I expect
Mm.
myself to win the Rogue Invitational, but if I don't, I know that it's okay.
Yeah.
What does your family think about your career path and just like all of the ebbs and flows that eventually led you to dipping full into strongman? Like, is this something that maybe they predicted was going to happen versus like you thinking it was going to be reality before it actually was?
Yeah. Well, funny, when I was about 20 years old and when I was pursuing running, my best friend at the time and training partner, I didn't know much of anything about strongman. I might have been able to tell you that I knew who Brian Shaw, Eddie Hall, Hathor Bjornsson was, but that's probably it. He told me, "You have to do strongman. It is a waste for you not to do strongman." I spoke to my girlfriend at the
Oh wow.
time, and she was like, "Oh, I don't want you to have to do certain things. I don't want to have to get heavy, and I just don't like the idea." So I just scrapped it 5 years before I actually started it. But you know, when I first started speaking as though I could be one of the best in the world and I could be one of the strongest, my mom, who is an eternal supporter of mine, had a healthy level of skepticism of like, come on, dude, like
Yeah.
surely. But at the same time, growing up and all of my decisions that I had made as an adult, um, I had such a strong feeling, as I think many men do, that like I just needed a period of my life where I was out making it on my own with no support. And that's a large reason why I went all the way over to Australia. I didn't know anyone. All I had was an address for a place I was renting and a start date for school, and that was it. And I've conditioned my mom to sort of go like, whatever he decides, Mitch is going to be okay. Yeah, he figures it out somehow. In fact, it's sort of a running joke in my family that somehow I just make everything work for me, and it seems to turn out fine, regardless of decisions. And and they're calculated and they're educated guesses on what might be a good opportunity. But I've been really fortunate in my life that more things have worked out than not, and I think they just accepted that. Hopefully, this is an extension of that.
Well, I mean, it certainly worked out so far. But speaking to the perception of strongman as a whole, you mentioned, earlier in the interview, from the outside looking in, what is it that do you think that the average person gets wrong about strongman or doesn't understand what goes into the product that they see stepping out onto the floor, say, in a couple weeks in Scotland?
Yes, it's a good I think that the number one misunderstanding is in who the people are who participate in strongman, particularly at the top level. The average person who gets involved in strongman, who makes it to world's strongest man, may have played a sport or two in the past, but ultimately they were just looking for a way to express their strength and to improve themselves and to lift weights by themselves. And the product of having people who lift weight by themselves and that's their primary interest is that you get a lot of really big tattooed guys who are frankly a little bit more on the shy side than you would expect. And so you
Mm,
might see these hulking guys who have no interest in speaking to you and think that they're in some way trying to be intimidating or trying to be or they might be a bit aggressive or something. It's genuinely the nicest group, the softest, gentlest group of guys you can imagine, from top to bottom for the most part. So I think that would be the biggest misunderstanding.
mm,
But I think that the number one thing that CrossFit fans and people listening to this podcast wouldn't know off the bat is that we cannot be told events on the hop. We can't just be have a surprise event thrown in and expect us to do anything because we operate so close to our tissue tolerances in all of the movements that if you just told us max deadlift is an event, we would all herniate discs and blow out our spines. It would be impossible. And
mm,
so we
Oh
know all
wow.
of our events. We prepare specifically for every one of our events and say deadlift is the easiest example. We have a max deadlift at Rogue. We know that 8 weeks in advance. And so for 8 weeks, week after week, you're slowly building up your capacity to then you basically know what you're going to do on the day. And
mm.
we know that for all of our events. And so we are hyper specifically trained for exactly what we're doing. But for anyone who's followed the Rogue for any period of time or followed Strongman, you know that those events are always different. They are never the same. There are hundreds of different things that we may be asked to do in different ways, but we're always told, prepared, and scale into that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. As soon as you said that, it made sense because I think on the CrossFit side, we are so conditioned to just wait and see, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, but I guess at the same time, if you really want to see, athletes such as yourself, find the limit and push the envelope of that, you kind of have to give them that runway.
Yeah, we had a funny one in 2022. They gave us 5 of 6 events and said the 6th one is gonna be an overhead surprise, and there was revolt. We're like, "No, we cannot have surprise. Surprise does not exist for us." And so we only
Yeah.
had, I think, 3 or 4 weeks to prepare for, the Sear dumbbell ladder, which was the same thing they did the year before, but I think it's hard even for organizers of Rogue to understand that yes, I might be physically capable of launching 280 over my head with one hand any day of the week. Yes, any day of the year. But is my rotator cuff prepared for that? Am I coordinated enough to not throw it in the slightly wrong spot that's going to tear my labrum? So on and so
Mm.
forth. So it's very very different in that respect to CrossFit, which is uh, I think there's a level of appreciation that CrossFit should have for strongman in that way. But there's also a massive level of appreciation that I have for how insane it is to just be prepared for anything that's thrown at the CrossFitters.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been to Scotland before?
Yeah, I was in Scotland. I got back 5 days ago.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
so you were just there and now you're home for 2 weeks and then going right back.
Yeah, yeah.
Was that just show
Well,
prep, getting acclimated, trying to doing some recon? What was
No,
that
no,
for?
no. There was a Giants Live World Tour Finals that's held in Scotland every
oh,
year,
okay.
and so I was off competing there. But look, and that's where I say I can't even tell you that I'm fully committing to strongman right now, because if I were, I would be hyper fixated, hyper focused on training. But right before that Scotland show, I was in Mexico for business. Then I went to Vegas for the Olympia. I went to Denver for a beer event with Sam Adams. I was home for 2 days and went off and competed sick, and it's just making the most of life, and that's really my largest paranoia, is that I'm not religious in any way, I'm not spiritual in any way, so I believe we have a certain amount of time on the earth to make an impact, and it terrifies me to not have made the impact that I hope to by the time I die.
Hmm. Do you think that your approach and like the way you just laid things out is a bit of a paradigm shift in the sport? I think anytime you have um, turnover in terms of the elite athletes or the household names in any sport, there can be either a culture shift or a paradigm shift in terms of how they approach the sport, how they approach professionalism, careers, things like that. And I think we had a brief convo down in SoCal over an acai bowl, and I think you kind of touched on that a little bit, and I'm curious if you could kind of maybe dig into that or highlight that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm different to a lot of strongman athletes, and I'm different largely because I came up so fast. I came up partially in COVID. I never had the time to be indoctrinated in what everyone else does. So when I
Mhm.
rock up at World's Strongest Man and guys are incessantly jumping between the hot tub and the cold bath and back and forth, and I'm just sitting in the hot tub because that feels way nicer and I enjoy that. And I sort of see what they do on the back end, and I look at how much food they believe they need to eat and how heavy they believe they need to be. But then you'll see guys like really bulk up for say the Rogue Invitational. Well, every single event at Rogue, apart from one, is a medley that involves moving of some sort. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to be super heavy. And since we have so many events that are moving related, your competency and coordination in something like running should be really high. So I've been running every day in my prep for the Rogue Invitational, and running is something that no strongman before me ever would have done. But we are seeing a culture shift where more guys are sort of looking at me. They're sort of catching that these are the things that I'm doing. I'm clearly recovering better than anyone. I'm more consistent than anyone. I have more wins than anyone. And it's not because I'm Thor. It's not because I'm 6'9". There's clearly something that I'm doing that's attributing to my performance. And I think it's those things. And part of it is maintaining a reasonable level of aerobic fitness, which is reasonable in the context of strongman, but is admittedly still poor. It is taking all of these extra recovery things that CrossFitters do as well, diving into the research and knowing that the vast majority of them are a complete waste of time. And for me, it boils down to three things. It's managing life stress, managing sleep, and managing nutrition. And if you can get those three things right, then like if a massage feels good to you, then great, go do it. And I do that sometimes. And if acupuncture, if you like that, that's fine. But recognize that all of those things are total accessories to your ability to perform well. In fact, managing life stress and having a million quote unquote recovery appointments are actually juxtaposed to each other. and probably works against it. There's a really good culture shift happening in swimming right now that I think is a useful parallel. I'm sure you guys knew swimmers growing up who they're off at practice at 5 a.m. and swim in the pool for 3 hours and then go back to the pool in the evening. Well, the vast majority of elite swim programs now don't have kids swimming in the morning because the sleep that they're going to get is going to mean that their session in the evening is going to be twice as productive. And that's a parallel to my approach as well. What can I do to be most productive for my training within the confines and the constraints of my life, which are not small, between business and baby and family. But I get a few things right. I apply that really well, and that fuels me to be better than anyone more times than not.
Yeah.
Do you think that that will actually lead to a shift in other future competitors to know what is possible? Because I'm sure right now or historically, there's been a stereotype of what they think a strong man or strong woman looks like and how they perform and what their background is. But you're kind of going against the grain. Do you think we'll see a shift with more athletes coming up with more diverse backgrounds like that?
I hope so. I really hope so. But the answer is I don't know. I know I'm making an impact at the grassroots level, and I know it'll make people, it'll improve people. But there's a large faction of people right now who just call me an alien. And if that's the route that you go, and you just say Mitch is an alien, then it almost diminishes any effort that I've put towards becoming as good as I have been, which I firmly believe is replicable and other people could do it as well. And I don't hide
Mm.
anything. I post a YouTube video every single day telling everyone everything I'm doing. If you want to copy me, I encourage that because I do want the sport to move forward. So time will tell, but I think it's going to be hard for people not to recognize that the ability to be agile, to move, to be coordinated with your hands, coordinated with your feet, all of those things are eternally helpful in being a good strongman.
Hmm.
Mm. And we've touched a lot on the physical aspects of it, and you mentioned some of the recovery things, but what else is involved? So, say comp prep specifically, because we have one of the big four coming up. Is there anything outside of the physical aspect that you do to get ready for a show that you have seen, that you've been able to filter out some of the maybe the BS and show that this helps?
Yeah, more often than not, I have technical improvements when I'm outside of the gym, in the way that
Mm.
I think about events and I think about how I'm doing something and I think about the technique of something, and I have an ability to visualize, but even to a greater extent, I can almost feel what's going to feel better with a certain implement. So whether I like it or not, that stuff is running in the back of my head relentlessly. You say we have a 200-pound kettlebell. We've never had kettlebells before, and for us 200 pounds is not heavy, but just like thinking about how to manage a kettlebell of that weight, get it to one shoulder, press it overhead, uh, conceptually I'll have repped that out 1,000 times before it actually happens on the competition floor. So visualization would be it, but honestly I try to keep my mind off of it more than anything, and that's part of managing life stress. I could
Mm.
hyperfixate and stress about the invitational for the next 2 weeks, or I could go to the pumpkin patch with my daughter and we could celebrate Halloween, and my wife's birthday's in a couple of days, and celebrate that. That stuff to me is way more important than any sort of mental process, going and seeing a sports psychologist, anything. If I'm happy and I'm in a good headspace, just as a human being, that's when I'm at my best competing, and you'll see the common thread that I don't entertain overcomplication of anything at all when it comes to strongman.
Mm. It's paying attention to the whole person versus just the piece of the person that encompasses
Yeah,
strongman.
and that's, you know, people who coach elite athletes get it wrong way more often than they get it right. If you ask your coach, what's the most important thing, a coach of an elite athlete, what's the most important thing? And they tell you anything about their training methodology or the rep counts or the periodization or whatever, they're totally missing the boat. Because if you're coaching an elite athlete, that person has freaky genetics. They're blessed in some way. And the most important thing is your relationship with your athlete. And with me and my coach, who's Laws, who's doing the commentating for the Invitational, yes, he helps me tremendously with my programming, sure, with knowing the implements, knowing the events. But the number one thing is like just having someone by your side who has your back, who understands your life, who understands your priorities, and supports you in that. to me, that's the most inspiring thing when it comes to me performing at my best.
No doubt.
So looking at the programming for the Rogue Invitational then, you mentioned that there's a 1 RM deadlift. Any predictions on what you think you'll be able to pull the day of?
Yeah, I've got a big deadlift session today. I'll probably be able to give you a better answer in 6 hours.
Yeah.
But
Fair.
it's the thing about strongman is it's not scaled in any way. So the heavy favorite in this event is Thor. He'll pull 1,000 pounds plus for sure. And I believe I'll be capable of near 1,000. And I pulled 966 at Shaw when my back wasn't feeling 100%. I probably had another 20 pounds in me. I was somewhere 980, 990. But it's just going to be 1 pound heavier than the guy who's trying to come second. And
Mm.
that could be Matt Ragg, that could be Bobby Thompson, that could be Evan Singleton. But whoever that dude is, I'm going to be 1 pound heavier than that dude, so that Thor lifts 1,000 pounds and only gains 1 point on me, and that'll put me in really good stead for the rest of the competition.
I like that approach. Looking at the rest of the programming, is there anything that, gets you excited to go out there and attack? Like, I know you try to, do well at all of them, but I think some athletes probably have an event or an implement that like, you're like, oh, that's cool. Or I really want to see where I'm capable here.
Yeah, we'll talk about a few, but the true answer is to be as consistent as I've been. I don't have favorite and least favorite events. They're all very, very good events for me, to be honest. But something like the Stone Series, I've done 8 competitions so far this year, but in 5 of those shows, I've won the event before the last. I've won the show before the last event, so I haven't had to do the last event in several shows, which is almost always Atlas Stone. So I haven't been able to show what I can do on stones in a long time. So I'm
Mm.
excited to be able to show that. It's the 3rd event of this competition, so that'll be fun. Anytime a yoke is involved, I love that. So yoke into power stairs is something that we're doing. And
Hmm.
the power stairs, they made a really, really smart decision. Normally our power stairs are 18 inches tall. Uh, but you can imagine the taller the stair, the higher you have to pull the implement. And then you have this incredibly large disparity in what's demanded of an athlete depending on their height. So guys like Thor and Tom just stand halfway up and place it on. But a guy like me who gives 4 inches to them, I have to actually like try to get my arms involved as well. And so at 12-inch steps, it's truly just going to be who is the best, most efficient, and fastest. I think that's going to be a great event. The overhead medley, where we have the kettlebell to sear dumbbell to axle to a heavier axle. I set the world record in axle press. A lot of guys are going to struggle on that last one, and I think that'll be a great finish to the show. We're all putting an exclamation mark, hopefully on a victory, but on my performance nonetheless. Where I think one of the coolest things in strength is not necessarily when someone lifts way more than anyone ever has. I think the coolest thing is seeing someone struggle and seeing the next guy make it look easy. And I can
Mm.
virtually guarantee that I'll have an easy looking results on that last event.
Why do you think
And
that
no,
is? Like you mentioned like seeing someone struggle and seeing someone make it look easy. Is it just by sheer like contrast, or is it like actual perspective for the people at home to realize like, oh, it's not just something you can throw around? Like, well, what makes
Yeah,
that special in your mind?
I think it's just giving the perspective. I think seeing one of the strongest humans on the planet not be able to budge something, and the next guy just walk up and lift it like it's nothing. It really shows the levels to the game. And in our lives, we appreciate strength most. Not really when we have an object that's just on the limit of human capacity and can you shift it or can you move it? No, it's I can't move my fridge 1 inch. Can you help me? And the biggest, strongest guy comes, lifts it off the ground, turns around and places
Mhm.
it. That's the stuff that I think really gets people excited. And so for me, that's how it translates over.
So since you were just in Scotland, you have already been able to get a taste of what that community, what the crowd is going to be like. Can you give us any predictions of what we can expect to see from the crowd at Rogue this year?
CrossFitters put on notice that Scotland is the land of strongman. And in Texas, there was a large CrossFit crowd and they entertained us, and that's great. But it's going to be time that they're going to find out that we have a whole sport, a whole world that exists outside of them. And they are rabid. They are so loud, so energetic, so engaged. The sound at shows over in the UK as a whole is absolutely out of this world. I'll tell you a story about the Royal Albert Hall. So this year I broke the axle press, cleaner press world record. I did 218 kilos, which is 482 pounds. And I did that at the Royal Albert Hall, which is a few blocks away from Buckingham Palace. And this venue was, of course, built for Prince Albert. It's been around for a very, very long time. It's had every artist you can imagine go through there, many, many different events. When I pressed that axle, it broke the all-time record for noise in that venue, amplified or unamplified. And of course, it was unamplified. And so it's the loudest that that venue has ever been in history. And you're going to see some similar passion, similar excitements up in Aberdeen.
Oh, I just got goosebumps. That's so
Dude,
cool.
seriously, that's
Yeah.
unreal. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's now double the jealousy that neither of us gets to be there in person. But oh man,
And
damn,
Royal Albert Hall, I'm just looking it up now. The
that's
construction date was it was finished in 1871. So 153 years. That single moment of Strongman was the loudest in 153 years.
You have to add that to your resume, Mitch.
seriously,
Yeah,
that's gotta be on the
That's your
resume for
PR.
sure.
Yeah.
it's I say, you know, I've won every I've been fortunate enough to win every single title I've competed for, every big title in the sport. I'm the only one to win all 4 major titles in Strongman in history.
Mhm.
But that single moment at Royal Albert Hall is that's the highlight of my career, because every show you sort of win slowly. You find out that you're winning and you just hold on. But to have a moment that you either get it or don't get it, and things going absolutely ballistic, that is absolutely at the top.
Oh man, that's just electric. One thing that just popped in my head is the frequency of competing. You mentioned a few times, popping around to different events and even going pretty much back to back at some point. For most of us uninitiated, what is the frequency that you think you can reasonably compete at a high level for shows around like on a calendar year?
Strongman is you can only peak a few times a year, and if you know why, you know why. If you don't worry about it. But I would say you can truly peak twice a year, and for
Mm,
me, that twice a year is World's Strongest Man and the Strongest Man on Earth. Now, at the Rogue Invitational, I won't be peaked, as in my peak strength won't be as high as it is all year round, but it doesn't have to be, because this show is so medley based and fitness based that I don't need to be as strong as I've ever been. Whereas something like Strongest Man on Earth or the Arnold, you have to be extremely well physically prepared. Now,
mm,
saying that you can only be peaked twice a year doesn't mean to me that you can only be good twice a year. So, like I said, I've competed 8 times so far this year. I've won 7 of those shows and come second in the one that I didn't win. And a lot of the second tier shows, I'm fortunate enough that I can go treat them as a training session and win them more often than not. And
mm,
since our weights are predetermined in more events than they're not, I can do, for example, I can do a deadlift, 800-pound axle deadlift for reps, and I can see what everyone else has done. And I can, for example, this past weekend, everyone else had done, the best they done was 5. I did 6. I probably could do a set of 10. So 6 for me is not that big of a deal. It's not overly difficult. And so that over and over and over, I think so long as you're training hard, you can compete very regularly. Culturally in strongman, I think there's a tendency to have a big show, take 3 weeks off, sort of reintroduce yourself to weights, and it will create these big undulations. But one of the biggest things in approach that would set me different from the rest of guys is that I don't prefer to compete. I prefer to go into the gym. I prefer to kick my own ass. I prefer to work really hard. That's why I got in it. That's why I love it. That's what I love the most. And so that for me is that's the underpinning of everything I do. And since it is, I'm always in pretty good shape, and I always can perform pretty well, even if I'm not particularly peaked for a competition.
huh.
I think that's
And
so interesting because from my perspective, I feel like the majority of athletes, and maybe I'm just thinking of CrossFitters, prefer to be in person competing. And maybe it's because there are less opportunities to do so. But do you feel like you're the norm for strongman when it comes to preferring to train by yourself in the normal routine versus being on a stage?
No way. I think a lot of guys like to compete, and there's no problem with this is not a knock on anybody. There's no problem with wanting to be famous. There's no problem with wanting to be recognized for your accomplishments and wanting to have fans. Um, it's not that I don't want to have fans and I don't want to be recognized, but that's just not important to me fundamentally as a human being. I love inspiring people. I love that people can listen to me, and that's why I put such an effort to put a good message out there and to put so much content out there. But never did I ever desire to be famous or want to be famous. There was a time in my life when I struggled to have a one-on-one conversation with a stranger, never mind speak to a crowd or a group of people or be hired for speaking events or anything like that. So yeah, I think I'm very unique in that regard. And I think because the outcome that I want is to be the strongest version of myself. And I don't care if I prove that in a competition or at the gym. Of course, financially, I'd much rather prefer it in a competition. But my ultimate goal is to objectively improve myself, not to collect trophies. And it's created a difficult thing for me now, where I have every trophy that's possible to win, and I don't really care about winning trophies twice. I don't care about being the best of all time. It's not, I will not feel incomplete if people don't see me as the best of all time, because that's just some external person's opinion who I've never met, and that just doesn't matter to me. But I absolutely love to train. I love hanging out with the guys. I love competing. I hate to lose. And so all of those things then tend towards, well, we keep kicking on. We keep having the best results that we can. But I think there's, I like to think that I don't have much ego about what I do. I don't really have much vanity about what I do. I just see myself as someone who lifts weights, and I have so much respect for people who work normal 9 to 5 jobs, because if I was an accountant, I'd be fired in a heartbeat. If I had a boss or a normal workspace, I would struggle mightily, I believe. And so for people to look at me and go, you thrive so much in this particular area, I'm just fortunate that thousands of people see me do my job well, when there are many, many, many jobs that I wouldn't do well. And so I don't think I'm better than anyone just because I lift weights. And so for me, then it becomes strange for people to sort of like get really excited and fawn over you and think that you're the best thing that's ever happened, when internally, I just don't feel that way. I feel like a normal guy who does my best to support my family, and hopefully I inspire people to do the same thing.
No doubt. And you mentioned that last piece that, inspire others to do the same thing. Can you touch on that? Is there anything else that you feel like at this point in your career you hope to have a lasting impact, whether outside of the fact of, just being trying to, win competitions and being labeled as the best, whether it's for the sport of strongman or human movement in general?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I put a video out after I won the strongest man on earth, and I was having that sort of difficult consideration in my head of like, what is the point of continuing when I've
Mm,
won everything that I can? And it's because my goal is to be the greatest strongman of all time, but I don't see greatness as the most number of competitions. I see greatness as the most positive impact. And so
mm,
I don't care if it's strongman or it's CrossFit or it's marathon running or whatever, so long as someone's inspired that they can go out there and do things. Because I have I have won World's Strongest Man. I have also run a marathon. So you can't just tell me that I'm genetically gifted to do both of those things, because they're juxtaposed. And I hope people can hear that story and go, well, if I just commit to something, then I could do something pretty special as well. And I hope what people see in me, and when I talk about, I'm the best in the world, but my goal is just to be the best version of myself. And if someone comes along and beats me and I'm continuing to improve them, I'm happy. I think other people should really take that on board, because too many want to look around and say, what am I ranked in the world? And how much better can I get? And can I turn pro? And can I do this? Well, what if you're just not genetically capable of turning pro? Why can you not be proud of snatching 135? And that's an incredible accomplishment that for you, maybe you never would have done without the hard work. And I think people taking pride in the process and in taking care of their own health, taking care of their own movements, and by proxy, then being able to take care of their loved ones. That's the stuff that people should be really excited about. Now, I hope that I'm remembered more, to be honest, for my clothing brand, for my athletic accomplishments. And unfortunately, my athletic accomplishments are getting so out of control that it's going to be a tall hill to climb. But the Lift Heavy Be Kind clothing brand, I started that so that people can see people like me and like you guys who are comfortable and confident in gyms, and go like, actually, those are people who are by and large really good people who are willing to help me out. And it is a welcoming space. And it's not a declaration of who I am, because I can be an asshole just like everyone else can be, but it's a declaration of who I think everyone should strive to be. someone who works hard, someone who does their best to be good to other people. And frankly, at the gym, whether it's a CrossFit gym or commercial gym, strongman gym, it's the only time that you're going to have any sort of substantial interaction with strangers on a day-to-day basis, where you actually have a conversation with someone who you've never met before. And that's, to me, what the most special part about fitness is. You cannot tell me one other place that you speak to a stranger at length about something other than their job to help you. You might give someone the finger when you're driving the car, but like that's the second most stranger interaction you have next to the fitness community. And it's just such a special thing to be a part of. And I feel privileged to be a small part of it.
Well, Mitch, thank you so much for coming on the show. You spread these great messages. You're a great human, also an incredible athlete. We can't wait to see everything that you do at the Rogue Invitational, and keep spreading your fun content for us because we're enjoying it.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Big thanks to Mitch Hooper for joining Tommy and Lauren for that conversation. I love watching that guy compete because he just does things in competition where you can tell that he's thought through the whole thing. He has a plan. I think it was there was an event, I think it's the Arnold Strongman Classic, where it was like a stone throw.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually took a shoe and went out and like marked on the track where he wanted to throw. No one else made like any sort of like visual representation of where they wanted to stop on the runway to throw the stone. And it's like little things like that. Doesn't seem like a lot, but he does that kind of stuff. He's really cerebral.
Yeah. And this was apparent. I consider it a very serendipitous meeting. I'd met him before. Had a beer with him at Wadapalooza years and years past with, Brent and Pat kind of discussing the event after it was over. But this was the first time I really got to sit down and chat with him at Waza SoCal. Like you said, we were grabbing acai bowls, and he was like, "Well, come on, sit down. Let's have a chat." Like he knew who you were. He knew about our show, and because we had discussed having him on.
Mhm.
But he was like, "Yeah, let's chat." And from the outset, you can always, maybe it's a champion's mindset. Maybe it's some the common thread amongst people who are very successful in their sport. But it's pretty apparent right away when you talk with Mitch that he approaches it from a mindset and like a level, there's a level of cerebralness, I guess, if that's the correct term, that's
Mhm.
different than other people in a way that elevates him
Yeah.
significantly. And that carries over to other parts of his life too. In our conversation that you just listened to, there are points where you're like, oh yeah, that does make sense. And I find usually the most profound things for me when it's someone about how they've approached life, how they approach work, professional relationships, whatever it is, and they have clearly found success. The most profound things seem like the most common knowledge, common sense things, but that just haven't quite hit you yet.
Mhm.
They're the ones who are like, "Oh yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Why haven't I thought of that?" Almost kind of thing. And it's very easy to overlook and poo-poo, if you will.
Mhm.
But I find the two conversations that I've had with Mitch, him bringing up some really poignant things, and I really enjoyed chatting with him, and I really enjoy his approach to competing in strongman and how content he seems and complete as a human.
Yeah. I also love his slogan, lift heavy, be kind. I think that's pretty cool.
Totally.